I need you guys to help me get a message out to some of the other ones. Some of the other DC superheroes. Let's let Flash, Shazam, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. Let's let them know something, because the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Hello, welcome to part 2 of the history/retrospective of the DCEU. If you're watching this without watching part 1, good luck. Anyways, where did we leave things off? After the financial and critical disaster that was Justice League, DC Films found a new executive to oversee production in Walter Hamada. Hamada's main focus going forward post-League was to de-emphasize the shared continuity in favor of more standalone films, as Wonder Woman was their biggest success so far. This is also coupled with the fact that anything strictly attached to a shared story had received mixed receptions at best, pushing DC Films towards this direction. Instead of making films solely focused on building up to something, it was time to focus on more self-contained stories. For a few short years, it was just whatever could get off the ground got to go on ahead. Hamada even gave the green light to Todd Phillips to go full on in developing his Joker movie, which is something he was working on even before Justice League. As it is not part of the DCEU, I will not be covering it. Jared Leto also pushed for his own solo Joker film to be considered, which I would have loved to cover, but sadly does not exist. This time also saw increased development towards the Matt Reeves Batman movie, which started as a vehicle for Affleck, only to be changed to focus on a younger version of him, only to ultimately become a version of the character completely divorced from the DCEU. In terms of actual DCEU films coming up, Hamada didn't really have much say in the next two. One had already completed filming and the other was just about to start in the same month that Hamada took the position. Luckily, both these films fit the new mold Hamada was pushing for, with the first being... So Aquaman was being developed and filmed during all the post-production woes of Justice League. The director James Wan was a pretty out-of-the-box choice. Wan was mostly known for horror, having started the Saw, Insidious, and Conjuring franchises. His first big foray into blockbusters was Furious 7, which experienced its own production problems due to the sudden death of Paul Walker. Despite this, 7 went on to be the highest grossing film in the franchise. WB offered Wan either Flash or Aquaman, and Wan, attracted to the challenge of Aquaman, chose to try his hand. I think Wan saw Aquaman as an opportunity to really test out his creativity, as no one was really expecting much from an Aquaman movie. For years, Aquaman was usually the butt of jokes as people thought he was lame.
Do something!
If you don't like starfish, you're gonna be mad about what I just did.
Casting Jason Momoa was Snyder's attempt to combat that lameness, as now instead of a lame white guy who can communicate with fish, we now have a big buff Polynesian guy who can communicate with fish. Wan wanted the chance to create dazzling visuals and environments, and most executives probably won't be as picky about stuff in an Aquaman movie as, say, a Batman movie. The film was shot from May 2017 to late October of the same year. The movie did not come out until December 21st of 2018 due to the extensive visual effects work the movie demanded. The real question is, was it worth it? Is Aquaman a good movie? Kind of. I think Aquaman is the baseline that every other superhero movie should at least strive for, because it is one of the most 5 out of 10 films I have ever seen. A perfect mix of some really cool stuff and some really bad stuff. First, I will talk about the visuals, as I think this is the most ambitious and unique looking film in the DCEU, mostly because it has color, literally and figuratively. Modern superhero movies, especially Marvel, feel so flat visually as the directors aren't usually involved with planning, as VFX work needs to start way before someone signs on due to deadlines. Wan clearly was involved in the VFX process, as intentional creative camera work is incorporated into heavy CGI sequences. The film's first action scene is a faked one-shot with the camera whipping around as smooth choreography plays out. It is a good first impression that is followed with pretty great action throughout. All of it feels well thought out and executed expertly. The other standout visual element is the overall design and look of Atlantis and its various technologies. Every big sequence is just filled with visual flair, where it feels Wan said, wouldn't it be so cool if we did blank? Then they just do it. Let's have our characters go to the center of the earth and dinosaurs are just there. Let's have a horror sequence with a Lovecraftian horde of fish monsters. Let's have an octopus play the drums to hype up the crowd. Wan wouldn't have been able to do any of this if he chose Flash. While I do like this film from a framing perspective, there are some apparent flaws in the effects. Tons of badly aged green screen, overuse of slow-mo, frame rate slow-mo, and the goddamn hair. One of the challenges of making an Aquaman movie was always going to be the handling of the underwater scenes, as you know, he is Aquaman. Snyder danced around this challenge by clearly filming Momoa in a water tank in BVS, and then just creating air domes so actors could say dialogue in the League films. This movie opted to have underwater environments generated around the actors, which also called for the need to CGI their hair to float to extremely mixed results. Now, while these are flaws about the movie, I have come to view this problem from a different angle. VFX artists are extremely overworked and stretched thin given the higher demand by studios to use them to avoid paying other people more money. I really only want to comment on the effects when it negatively impacts a scene like Cavill's horrific lip. The absolute worst kind of CGI is when it is bad quality and the camera shot is flat. I just try not to be too picky about textures and quality and care more if the directing is interesting. Also, let's face it, CGI will always eventually age, even if it looks good now, so there's not tons of value in complaining about imperfect CG. So while shots in Aquaman have flaws, the shots are usually always ambitious in some way. What I also like about the movie is the character of Arthur, who gets expanded upon after leaving no strong impressions in Justice League. Speaking of which, this film is constructed in a way that it doesn't really require you to have seen the other DCEU movies. Every time we thought we saw Atlantis in Justice League before, it was just old rock structures, but this movie just throws that all out the window for the more colorful version presented. Arthur met Mera in Justice League, but they don't really know each other. Arthur is actually likable in this film, thanks to the tone finally complementing Momoa's performance. He delivers one-liners with the energy of, yup, this is a fun movie.
Permission to come aboard.
He carries the whole movie, and the film is always significantly worse when he is not on screen. What is even better is Arthur actually has like a strong character arc of learning responsibility while also embracing who he is. I think Momoa really sells the scene where he confronts the Karathan monster by opening up about how he feels, this time not caused by the lasso of truth, haha. I also love that Juan understands the importance of hero shots and how the framing of that can evoke strong reactions. Superhero films have gotten pretty lazy about this, making their superhero costumes feel just like any other outfit they wear. Arthur showing up in his comic-accurate costume is a perfect example of how to do this right. The film is so well put together visually and presentation-wise that it is a shame that it's brought down by a really bad screenplay. The story and world building is really clunky. Take our two villains, Black Manta and Ocean Master. Black Manta is Aquaman's arch nemesis, and here he feels like a forced addition. We meet him and his dad in the span of 2 minutes, then expects us to care when his dad dies. The film slowly builds up Black Manta's rematch with him, preparing for revenge, and then it happens like halfway through and Aquaman throws him off a cliff and we never see him again until a post-credit scene. Maybe if he came back in the climax to justify his inclusion, but instead he is just here for sequel setup. You could cut him out of the movie, leave his dad getting killed, and just have him show up in the sequel being like, Aquaman killed my dad, and it would make almost no difference. He's just some muscle for Aquaman to have a little extra challenge fighting, but he completely exists in the shadow of the movie's main villain, Arthur's half-brother, Orm. Orm is a terribly written character on multiple fronts. His whole motivation is he hates ocean pollution, so he hates humanity and wants to wage war against them. This seems like a way to try make his vendetta seem justified, but like most shitty populist movies, it is undercut with how the character is portrayed. Orm comes off as an Atlantean supremacist who sees humans as inferior. He claims the humans are trying to kill them by having Black Manta stage an attack to convince other royals. Turns out humans aren't even aware Atlantis exists by this point, so no, there is no planned attack. Orm makes valid points about ocean dumping, but he lied about the attack, so don't listen to anything he says. Also packaged with Orm is a type of scene that really holds this movie back from being a full-blown, dumb, fun action movie. There are so many scenes where characters lazily drop lore or discuss the political landscape of Atlantis. I have dubbed these scenes fish politics. All these scenes are either boring as hell or horribly implemented. This film is littered with forced exposition dumps, the worst being when Willem Dafoe says, I have to tell you this legend, then Arthur says, I know that one, then Dafoe just tells it anyway. Understanding how Atlantis is laid out is crucial to understanding the major conflicts. The big final battle of this movie is not between Atlantis and humans, but by a kingdom of crab people who don't agree with Orm's war plan. Maybe these scenes would be better if you had stronger actors. Like, Dolph Lundgren should not be playing an eloquent political figure. Maybe the worst actor in the movie is this guy who plays a young Arthur during a flashback that is a key emotional part of his backstory.
Are you saying they executed her? Because she had me?
In terms of main cast, Amber Heard is a huge weak link. This has nothing to do with her current image, as I felt the same way as I did in 2018. She just cannot get on this film's wavelength. She and Momoa also have no chemistry, as all their bonding scenes are just the classic they bicker a lot, so they must be in love. This is also scored by really shitty sitcom music.
This place is a wasteland.
You're the one who calls this wasteland a home.
This isn't my home.
The music, like the film, is a mixed bag. Some of the score complements the scenes beautifully, while other times it can be trying way too hard to insist it is cool. While I have all these problems with the film, there is something infectious about Aquaman due to its director. It has become very clear over the last few years that James Wan is kind of a goofball. His follow-up to Aquaman was a movie called Malignant, which is so ridiculous and goofy, but still has his creative visual flair. I think it is just important to acknowledge that James may have just been screwing around to try to see what he could get away with, than these problems being genuine mistakes. Any movie that has a cover of Africa featuring Pitbull has to be self-aware in some way, right?
I'm something that you gotta say.
This guy got to make an Aquaman movie for somewhere between $160 to $200 million, so he was gonna have fun even if it was a flop. However, against all odds, Aquaman grossed $1.15 billion, the highest grossing DCEU and in general DC movie ever, and the only one in the series to cross that $1 billion mark. This film received a mixed response from critics, but it really didn't matter. Audiences worldwide wanted Aquaman. Apparently, a part of this film's glowing success was support from women. Superhero movies are very traditionally aimed to appeal to males, but women were sometimes outpacing men in attendance numbers for Aquaman. Since I can't speak for all women, I don't really know what about Aquaman brought them in. It is really anyone's guess. DC Films was looking up, and they were hoping Aquaman's success would rub off on their next release, which was Shazam, previously known as Captain Marvel, was a project in development at one time or another, even before the DCEU was a thing. The concept of a child turning into an adult superhero had huge marketing appeal, so it would make sense studios would want to try adapt it to the big screen. Probably seeing how well Aquaman was coming together under Wan, WB hired horror director David F. Sandberg for Shazam in July of 2017. James Wan probably vouched for him, as Sandberg had worked with Wan on an Annabelle film. What also most likely pushed Shazam to the front of the pack was its low budget of $100 million, the lowest of any DCEU movie up to this point. The film was cast throughout the rest of 2017 and began filming in January of 2018, ending in May. Shazam was released 4 months after Aquaman on April 5th, 2019. I don't have much to say about Shazam as a film, but I will say this is probably the best DCEU movie so far. Is it flawless? Absolutely not, but Shazam is the first film in this universe to be a superhero movie and gets what is appealing about superheroes. Also, why I cut it a lot of slack is that this is the first DCEU movie more concerned with being a comedy than some big epic film. The other DCU films had jokes, but they were either alright or the worst thing I have ever seen.
I am just a black hole of snacks. I am a snack hole.
Shazam is mostly genuinely funny, and the directing, editing, writing, and acting all play into that fact. The tone is exactly what it needs to be, with having goofy moments while also still managing to have touching scenes. What helps is the film's small scale, lets us focus in on the characters, which is one of the film's biggest strengths. Instead of focusing on grand saviors with important destinies or royalty ascending to a throne, the movie is just about a troubled foster kid looking for his mom. Billy is the first time in any of these movies I have felt really invested in a character emotionally in the DCEU. He has an understandable goal and has an actual personality. The bond he builds with his foster family is genuinely endearing. Some of his siblings are just reduced to singular quirks, but the ones that get focus really get to shine. I have to give it to the kids in this movie, as for the most part, they are pretty good. I have shit on almost all the child actors up to this point, but they were never the focus. The casting of this film needed to find actual kids who could hold their own, as sometimes they are the only ones in a scene. What about the world building and lore parts of the film? it is good. While Wonder Woman definitely played around with magical elements, this movie really embraced it, creating its own unique identity in this universe. We have old wizards, magical runes, and demons. Sandberg gets to really show off his horror chops in certain sequences, allowing it for there to be some stakes without it feeling world-ending. But now we get to the main event, Shazam himself. Shazam is played by Zachary Levi, who is best known for the TV show Chuck and voicing Flynn in Tangled. This was his first big movie role as a lead, and for the most part, he does capture the spirit of a kid in an adult's body. Now, I know Zachary Levi is a controversial celebrity as of late, but I will save that for the sequel. I do remember the most embarrassing thing he did to promote this movie was when set photos leaked of him in costume, and everyone thought his suit had rubber muscles on it, so he posted a shirtless pic to show how ripped he was, bro. Anyway, speaking of the costume, it's great. Again, as the movie is a comedy, the movie embraced the goofiness of the comic design and it works perfectly. Like, if the muscles were fake, it would work even better. It just fits with all the physical comedy bits in this movie. One of the most endearing parts of the film is Billy slowly discovering his powers, something we never really got in the DCEU. We got some cyborg stuff in Snyder, but that came out after this. This film really revels in the joys of having superpowers and really takes advantage of any scenario it can get with them. Levi definitely gets to shine the most during these early scenes, as during his initial confusion and exploration of his abilities, he really matches up with the actor who plays Billy. He does lose it during certain parts when he's playing up the silliness, especially when he gets cocky, but for the most part keeps it in line. What is even more impressive is when his foster siblings also get Shazammed, and their actors, despite their brief screen time, absolutely nail the mannerisms of their child counterparts. There are flaws here and there. While the villain is pretty weak, I do kind of give it a pass as origin story villains are rarely well fleshed out. They just need to pose a threat to our heroes so they can overcome them, and for the most part, Savannah does that just fine. Yes, this film could have put more effort into Savannah, but it makes it clear its priority lies in the bonds of this family and Billy's emotional arc. Billy doesn't even meet the main villain until over an hour in. I also like how the final fight isn't just let's hit the bad guy really hard till they give up like every other movie at this point. The character notices a weakness and cleverly exploits it to beat him. The other big flaw of this film is the inconsistency of the visuals. Sometimes it can look really good, but other times shots look really flat. While this is something to criticize Shazam about, it kind of doesn't bother me as the film makes up for it with the amount of heart it has. The scene where Billy finds his biological mom is extremely well done. Billy has been looking for his mom for years, only to find out she abandoned him because she couldn't handle it. The easy way out of this conflict would have been just to have her die, or leave her disappearance as a mystery for sequel bait. Instead, this comedic superhero movie takes time to present an actually compelling emotional scene between two characters without any grand speeches. Shazam has its flaws, but it does what it needs to do to get you to actually like these characters, and even if you don't, it always manages to be entertaining without shoving a million things colliding on screen. The last thing I need to comment on is Shazam's weird connection with the rest of the DCEU. The film is very standalone, with all important threads it sets being paid off within the story. What I find fascinating is the characters and world's appraisal of superheroes in this universe. Freddy loves Superman, and Batman even has dolls in toy stores. This feels so divorced from the reality we were shown in the previous films, as these guys are like scary. This movie treats previous heroes like how they are usually portrayed, which is heroic figures with public support. Affleck's Batman does not seem like the kind of guy people would want to sell funny toys of, especially with his whole I used to brand people for death thing. This does all work in favor of Hamada's make the films more standalone plan, as this film kind of just makes it seem like the previous films did not go down in the way we saw them. This is also odd with the film's ending, as a headless Superman makes an appearance and all the kids ooh and ah as if he's just a normal friendly superhero instead of the character we have seen up to this point. Apparently this was filmed during when Cavill was unsure about playing this character anymore, so they used a double. However, like anything in Shazam, it is all in good fun. Overall, I recommend Shazam as it is a genuinely fun time. Using our metric, the film made a profit by grossing $367 million on a $100 million budget. Shazam also got some of the best reviews of the DCEU behind Wonder Woman. Things are starting to look up as DC's last two releases managed to be big commercial and critical hits respectively. Now they needed to focus on the future, as Hamada had begun spinning the wheel on what would be the future releases for this universe.
And I'm telling it, so I'll start where I fucking want.
So Birds of Prey is an odd duck of a movie. Essentially, it only really exists because Margot Robbie loved playing Harley Quinn and wanted to do it again in something that wasn't Suicide Squad. She had tons of passion for this character and wanted to portray her life away from the Joker. She actually produced this film and was even the one to pitch it. After Suicide Squad was released and was successful, multiple spin-off projects were being considered for development, mostly involving Harley Quinn. There was talks of a movie solely about Joker and Harley, which never happened. There were talks to bring together various female Batman villains in Gotham City Sirens, which never happened. No matter how she ended up conjuring the idea, it was clear from the beginning that Margot wanted Harley Quinn to be in a group of other women heroes, which brought her to the comic book team Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey is a group of street-level female heroes who team up to take on bigger threats. So Robbie packaged her idea for a Harley Quinn spinoff, merged with the concept of bringing the Birds of Prey to the big screen. In April of 2018, Hamada gave the pitch the go-ahead and signed on indie director Kathy Hahn, making her the first Asian female director to direct a superhero movie. This was going to be the DCEU's first initially released R-rated film, as the success of the first two Deadpool movies had proven this can be a viable option. So once the rest of the cast was fully in place, the film was shot over the course of 2019 and was released on February 7th, 2020. It is very obvious where this movie pulls inspiration from, mostly from the first Deadpool, with tons of fourth wall breaks, quirky narration, and the overall absurd tone. Now, this all adds to the film's hardest hurdle to get over, which is that it's kind of annoying on purpose. Harley Quinn is a character that needs to ride a fine line. Keep it stable and she can be a fun addition. Go too far and she is annoying as hell. The film feels like if the trailer edit of Suicide Squad was the plan from conception. We even get title card graphics that feel like they were always meant to be included. This flash, accompanied with all the humor, could be grating to most people. Watching this, I get how people can find this annoying, but personally, it didn't really bother me. While I don't think this movie has a strong screenplay, it is carried by the direction. This is by far the most colorful of the DCEU movies up to this point, and it is dripping with style. Kathy Hahn deserves tons of praise for these visuals that shockingly can evoke stronger meaning. My only real criticism of the direction would be the lack of creativity when it comes to portraying Gotham. I don't need sprawling gothic statues, but this film is obviously shot in downtown Los Angeles and does very little to evoke any sort of fictional city. It kind of falls into this overall feeling that Birds of Prey has no interest in being a comic book movie. The film is more of a crime action comedy than a movie about a superhero team. Despite being called Birds of Prey, the team is not really a team until the climax. The core members interact with each other once in a while in the film, but all feel like they are in their own storylines that connect very loosely. Like, Huntress doesn't say a word to any of the main characters until the finale. This lack of unification also harms Harley's emotional arc in the film. The film opens with Harley being dumped by the Joker and trying to find some sort of new support system. She ends up getting betrayed by her confidant and discovers her roller derby team does not respect her. What this movie is trying to lead to is that the Birds of Prey, these women who are also searching for unity, will give Harley the support she needs. At the end of the film, the team celebrates their victory, and it seems like Harley has finally found a new group she can actually trust. Then she just ditches them and drives off with Cass, the little girl she has spent the most time with throughout the film. I mean, these three do form a team, but without Harley. They even go as far to show Harley and the birds at the same place she fell out with her derby team. Some may say that her getting friends wasn't the point, but her finding independence was. Then why did she drag the kid along? Maybe she is her support network? Get this though, Harley has one more appearance in this universe, and Cass is not even mentioned. There's another reason for this kind of abrupt ending, but I will get to that. This might have worked better if Harley was just kind of a witness to the birth of this team instead of her storyline being intertwined so fully with theirs. Her not ending up with this group just feels wrong given how the movie plays out. Now, this would be a bigger issue, but the thing the movie really nails is tone. Like, the film never takes itself starkly seriously at any point and just really cares about moving the plot forward. Like, say what you want about this film having an imperfect structure, but it is always moving for the most part. One of the highlights of the film are its action scenes, which are generously sprinkled throughout. Chad Stileski, director of the John Wick film, served as the film's second unit action reshoot director, giving all the action his signature flair. Even before he shot anything himself, his company was involved in planning the action scenes. The scenes are kinetic and are so satisfying to watch. Another highlight is Ewan McGregor's Black Mask, who might be the best DCEU villain ever. He is nothing amazing, but he manages to make the character intimidating and give him a fun personality while also giving the characters a reason to hate him. Also, him and Zaz are lovers in this film, and no one can convince me otherwise. I don't have much else to say about the quality of this film, but I get why some people are into it and some people aren't. I do, however, want to address something about its production. While there is no solid proof there was meddling, there seems to be plenty of evidence that things were altered. Kathy Yon had made some comments that she was not given final edit on the film. The most obvious edit was the brief glimpse at a fully staged musical sequence that was heavily featured in the marketing. Again, there's no solid proof about this, but I feel from how it is implemented and cut together that this was meant to be longer than just this brief, weird vision. Studio meddling would also explain the abrupt ending betraying Harley's clear goal in the film. Harley can't be on a team at the end because DC was planning another Suicide Squad movie at this point, which she would need to be in. So after all this, how did the movie actually do? Well, the movie was a huge failure. While the film's budget was reported to be at most $100 million like Shazam, it only grossed $205 million, falling short of breaking even. The reviews were somewhat mixed, but that didn't stop other DCEU releases, so what happened? Was it because it was rated R? Was it because it was released in February? Was it because it starred strong women? No, none of these things. The answer is quite simple. The movie did not do well because Harley Quinn was really fucking annoying in Suicide Squad. It is tough to market a movie starring a character no one liked other than as a Halloween costume and not make it seem like it was going to be filled with their annoying shtick. Putting the word fantabulous in the title of your movie doesn't really fill people with confidence that she will be any more tolerable. There's another reason some people cite for this movie's failure, but it just isn't true. So in March of 2020, 1 month after Birds of Prey came out in theaters, thousands of movie theaters announced their closures for the foreseeable future as they were dealing with this really small health scare called the COVID-19 pandemic. This did nothing to affect Birds of Prey's box office performance because the Sonic movie had released after Birds of Prey and made more money than it did. People just did not want to watch a Harley Quinn movie. Speaking of the pandemic, this event plays a crucial role in the history of the next two movies as they ended up getting released during this time. As I said before, movie theaters were closed for the foreseeable future, and all these studios had a backlog of movies they were preparing for release and now nowhere to put them. Dumping them on streaming or digital weren't really options because these movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars and would most likely lose money. Now, here's the weird place DC Films was in. Hamada had already laid out plans for its next few releases. The next on the horizon was a sequel to Wonder Woman. Rewinding the clock all the way back to 2017, Patty Jenkins started working on a sequel to DCEU's first hit, writing the script along with then DC Films head Jeff Johns. Once Hamada took over, it felt like he was very hands-off with Jenkins, as last time DC Films had altered the film for the worse. The film was eventually shot from June to December of 2018, with the title Wonder Woman 1984 being announced on the first day of filming. Now, the history of this release date is all over the place. It was originally announced for December of 2019, only to be pushed up to November of the same year, which usually means post-production is going well. Then, all of a sudden, they pushed the movie all the way back to June of 2020. Then the pandemic started, so they pushed it back to August, hoping theaters would be opening back up. When it got to June, it was pushed back again to October, and finally December, which would be its actual release date as Warner Brothers had conjured a plan. So by November, there were some theaters doing slow openings with limited capacity, so Wonder Woman 2 was coming to theaters. However, WB had just launched its new streaming service in May of 2020, so it was announced in November Wonder Woman would be a dual release. Instead of going to a theater, audiences could watch the film from the comfort of their own homes the same day. Before getting fully into Wonder Woman, I wanted to address a small part of the DCEU that was created due to the pandemic, and that is DC fandom. Given that large events like San Diego Comic-Con were off the table, DC created their own virtual convention to promote upcoming releases of games, TV, and film. DC Fandom ran only twice before giving up on it entirely. DC Fandom was a great idea, and watching the live stream was actually surprisingly smooth, but it is really awkward to watch now.
Now, this fan might look familiar to some of you guys.
Hey, it's Jake from State Farm here.
Everyone involved is either zooming in from their house or awkwardly standing in front of some green screen in a studio so they can interview people at a safe distance. Anyways, speaking of awkward decisions... Okay, so this movie's a mess. In an attempt to untangle it, I'm going to try start at what I think is the core idea the movie is attempting. Patty Jenkins has discussed in multiple interviews that she loves the original Richard Donner Superman film. Wonder Woman 1984, when it works, is trying to capture that same energy and feeling. While the first film is grounded in an actual historical conflict, this one is very much a superhero movie. Wonder Woman's full introduction has her speeding by and saving various people before beating up some criminals at a mall, all set to a very whimsical score. Just imagine Christopher Reeve in this sequence and it all starts to make sense. The problem with this approach is you need to walk a fine line. If you want to be goofy, you need to be consistently goofy, and never attempt to suddenly get really serious or pretend you have stakes. I think the first chunk of this movie nails it for the most part with very silly little payoffs, but once the actual plot kicks in, it turns into a whatever superhero film. WW84 falls into this trap as it insists upon these big emotional moments that you can't take seriously because the whole plot of the movie revolves around a rock that grants wishes. This thing is by far the most baffling decision in this entire movie. Every single thread in this film leads back to the Dreamstone that again grants wishes.
I really wish I had a coffee.
Yeah, I got Erica a coffee, but she's out sick. Does anybody want this?
What? Yeah, I'll take one.
I could see this work in a Wonder Woman cartoon show in a single 30-minute episode, but not a 2.5-hour blockbuster. Patty Jenkins clearly wanted to embrace the goofiness of the 80s setting and tropes, but you can't also have the very serious threat of nuclear war on top of that. It would be fine if it was all a joke, but no one's gonna argue this movie's a comedy, even unintentionally.
You're putting yourself and everyone else in grave danger. I need you to give me the stone.
The Dreamstone is the center of this movie, and though they try to establish rules to it, it is never fully consistent. As the film goes on, it becomes increasingly clear the Dreamstone is just a load-bearing MacGuffin they could use as an excuse to cram whatever they wanted in here. The main villain is Maxwell Lord, who is their attempt to criticize the greedy businessmen of 80s culture. Max is a terrible villain. He is less of a character and more of a vessel for commentary. He is blindly trudging ahead with all this Dreamstone nonsense to save his oil company, only to end up becoming the Dreamstone and almost causing complete nuclear war. Like, I get it, he doesn't care unless it benefits him, but at the end they try to make him sympathetic as Diana has to remind him he has a son, and that is his defeat. He is like, oh yeah, I was doing this for my son, I forgot. If you wanted him just to be an evil businessman and keep to your goofy tone, have her drop him off at jail at the end where he screams, "Curse you, Wonder Woman," as she flies away. The secondary villain connected to the Wish Stone is Barbara Minerva, aka Cheetah, who is among one of the more popular Wonder Woman villains. In this movie, she is a shy, meek woman who wishes to be like Diana, giving her superpowers, but it becomes like a power trip. So the main rule they establish about the Dreamstone is that if you make a wish, there will always be some sort of drawback. So when Barbara starts going on a power trip, you're like, oh, the wish affected her personality negatively. But then in the climax, she shows up and she's just a cheetah person now. They wrote a script and said, how do we make Barbara a cheetah woman? And they just said, just make her one at the end. Unlike Max, she doesn't get a forced emotional conclusion to her arc about feeling unseen, as Wonder Woman just beats her in a fight and that's it. Her motivations don't even make sense because Barbara only is opposing Wonder Woman because she doesn't want Diana to use Max Lord to have people renounce their wishes. Except by this point, Diana also doesn't want to renounce people's wishes because she wants to keep her wish, so what are they fighting about? They play so fast and loose with these rules that all the stakes mean nothing. Moving on to a huge point of contention with this film, let's move on to Diana's relationship with the stone. Continuing off from where the first film left off, Diana still misses Steve and unintentionally uses the stone to bring him back. This was a big talking point about the movie as they weren't keeping it a secret that Chris Pine was in the film. Diana and Steve's relationship was a lot of people's favorite part of the first movie, and I imagine the people behind this film did not know if it would do as well without it. Using a magic wish rock bringing him back to life was probably one of the easier choices. Like, if the Dreamstone surely could conjure up nuclear missiles out of thin air or turn someone into a cheetah monster, surely it could just bring Steve back into existence. However, instead of using that extremely easy explanation, they went about it in the worst way possible. In the film, Steve's soul is placed into some random guy's body who is credited only as Handsome Man. After Diana realizes it's Steve, she and the audience are just shown Chris Pine's face for the rest of his screen time. What makes this so weird is that Steve and Diana have sex using this guy's body. Jenkins claims she was embracing tropes of body swap or possession films. This would all be fine if the film was more of a goof, but it's clearly not, so it is weird when Diana has sex with some random guy's body and never bats an eyelash about it again. So when this happened, I thought, not much of a drawback to this wish, because clearly neither care about violating this man's autonomy and stealing his life away from him. But that isn't the actual drawback of this wish. The Dreamstone literally can conjure things out of thin air all the time, but for some reason, Steve's soul needed a vessel, so that doesn't count as the drawback. Instead, Diana slowly loses her powers for her wish. I truly cannot understand why they overcomplicated this so much. You had such an easy explanation, and instead you chose to do the more meaningless one. Diana losing her powers makes it so she loses a few fights, but you also could have just wrote she loses those fights. Instead of making the choice about her truly letting Steve go, it becomes a necessary choice as it looks like she is dying. WW84 feels like a movie someone makes when they think they aren't going to make another one. Write a list of everything you want to include and just force it in if it all works together or not. Cheetah is a popular villain, so use a magic rock to throw her in. Linda Carter from the original show would be a fun cameo, so create an exposition dump about a famous Amazon so we can throw her in. Wonder Woman used to fly around in an invisible plane, so let's create a contrived sequence where Diana casually reveals she can do magic to make a plane invisible so we can throw it in. Nothing seems to be thought out at all, creating a really confusing experience. Now, with the last few films, I talked about how disconnected they felt from the rest of the DCEU, and while that was weird, it was understandable as it focused on mostly new characters to the universe, as their stories don't revolve around the top-tier heroes. With this movie, it is shocking how much it goes out of its way to contradict this universe with it being a prequel. The first Wonder Woman, you're like, yeah, I understand how all this could have been kept on the down low with wartime government meddling to suppress information. This movie shows the world in chaos, with everyone very aware of the existence of the Dreamstone when Diana communicates to the majority of the world to get them to renounce their wishes. Man of Steel puts so much emphasis on how Superman would change the whole world order, but now you're telling me there was a magic wishing rock everyone was aware of? I guess Jonathan didn't watch the news? Also, Wonder Woman feels very public as a hero, but Batman and BVS had never heard of her before, and even in Justice League, it was pushing that she was keeping it on the down low. They try to address this in a small throwaway moment when she destroys mall cameras, then they never put thought into it again. This film makes it clear Patty Jenkins does not give a shit about the DCEU and just wanted to make whatever movie she wanted, continuity be damned. A very publicized fight about this movie was over the opening sequence, where we see young Diana compete in this obstacle course race thing. She cheats with a shortcut and is forced to accept a loss because she tried to take the easy way. It is supposed to tie in later when Diana gives up on making the whole Steve thing work so she can be strong enough to save the world. The problem is, unlike intentionally using a shortcut, Diana just made a wish in her head thinking it would never actually work, so the thematic link between these two moments is tenuous at best. DC Films really wanted to cut this opening scene as it felt unnecessary because it is. Jenkins fought for this scene because she felt like it was important, but you really could remove this and it affects nothing. Every director really needs to embrace the term kill your darlings, or else it could end up really harming what you're trying to make. I understand this sequence ate up a lot of time and resources, but this sequence does not fit in the finished product. If her reasoning was this was the only time you see Themyscira in the film, which it is, maybe just come up with a better plot to include Themyscira and not just because you want to? The film is just filled with bloat to the point where an hour in, Diana still is unaware of any sort of threat or obstacle and is having a dress-up montage with Steve going on a fun museum adventure. At the end of the day, there is no evidence who was responsible for the mess of Wonder Woman 1984, but my best guess would be Jenkins and Johns. I applaud the attempt at trying something a little retro, but they really needed to embrace it more than they did. This film feels like word salad, a mashup of so many ideas in an attempt to make sure everything can be covered, but in the end, miss the important part. An actual core to keep it all focused. And no, a magic wish rock doesn't count. Also, Gal Gadot is not a good actor, and somehow has only regressed as her career has gone on. Go watch any of her line read compilations if you haven't already to see my point. So in terms of box office, given the context of the world at the time, I think it's kind of unfair to label this movie and the next one as flops, as many have. Yes, these movies did not make money, but when you take into account the fact that multiple theaters were still closed, people were cautious about going to the theaters that were open, and the fact that if you had HBO Max, you could watch these movies the same day they were in theaters from the comfort of your own home, it's no wonder why these didn't make money. So from a pure numbers perspective, WW84 cost $200 million, but only made $169 million. After its release, they had signed up Jenkins for a third, but that ended up not happening. This is partially due to the next important figure we need to bring up in this retrospective. So back in 2018, DC Films was attempting to get a sequel to Suicide Squad off the ground, as the first had been a huge success for them. They had a few directors come in and out, as David Ayer had decided to pass on it considering his experiences on the first one. Many names such as Mel Gibson were considered before DC Films landed on the seemingly perfect choice, James Gunn.
Maybe I should check your engine.
In my engine, do you mean my vagina?
What?
Nothing, I just thought...
No, I said engine.
James Gunn was known for irreverent, edgy humor with a few dark comedy films under his belt, but inexplicably rose to mainstream fame after directing the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, with the first being a clear inspiration for Suicide Squad. Gunn was ready to begin working on Guardians 3, but in July of 2018 got into a fight on Twitter with right-wing conspiracy theorist Mike Cernovich. The fight got so heated, Cernovich pulled up a list of really offensive jokes Gunn had made on social media from the late 2000s to the early 2010s. Given Gunn worked for squeaky clean Disney, he was pretty quickly dropped from Guardians 3. Gunn had apologized for the jokes previously, and apologized again when Cernovich had brought them up. James Gunn quickly became a controversial figure with a very open schedule. DC Films instead saw this as an opportunity, so in October of 2018 hired Gunn to do the new Suicide Squad movie. Hilariously, within the same month, Disney actually said, you can do Guardians 3, which was made official in March of 2019. Gunn chose to delay Guardians production so he could focus on completing Suicide Squad. In one of the biggest documented L's of all time, Cernovich caused a chain reaction to not only get Gunn a new gig, but lead to something even more, which I will cover later. The film was shot from September 2019 until late February 2020, right before the COVID lockdown went into effect. So Gunn stumbled into this role, but let's see how it ended up working out when the film was released in theaters and HBO Max on August 5th, 2021. The Suicide Squad is a good movie. It really is, and I think so far this is the first movie you can say that for without any asterisks. The movie completely stands on its own, with a complete narrative and emotional arcs filled with characters you actually grow to like. Gunn gives the film a clear tone and vision. It is everything Defenders liked to pretend the first film was. One thing Gunn made very clear from early promotion is that he was fully embracing the goofier aspects of these characters instead of trying to modernize them. All the characters have silly, colorful costumes, and the main villain ends up being a giant alien starfish. Gunn's love for comic books is on full display, with shots that feel like splash pages or title cards that feel like issue breaks in trade paperback collections. Refusing to run away from this kind of stuff shows a strong love of comic books and allows the film to be sincere so the emotional moments don't fall flat. To be clear, this movie is really funny.
We're all gonna die.
I hope so.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But still manages to have its heart proudly displayed on its sleeve. The Suicide Squad feels like the first time DC Films went really hands-off and let a filmmaker cook. I think the only things they maybe meddled with was stuff with Idris Elba. Apparently at one point he was supposed to be Deadshot, but they wanted to leave the door open for Will Smith to come back, so they made him a character named Bloodsport instead. It really does not impact the movie in any meaningful way, so whatever. This movie immediately hooks in its viewers with the opening scene as we follow a squad including Harley, Boomerang, and Rick Flag from the first movie, before all of them get brutally killed, with Flag escaping and Harley being captured alive. This sequence really shows off the film's R rating while also helping wipe the slate clean for a new team to take focus. Is this movie a masterpiece? No, but it's just the best case scenario for a studio IP blockbuster. Sometimes the dialogue can be bluntly obvious, and James Gunn definitely is reusing some character archetypes from Guardians. But anytime anything falls flat, there are 5 more moments of fun comedy or slick action to make up for it. Like, the movie is just so well balanced that James Gunn even got Harley right. I enjoy Birds of Prey for what it is, but this is my preferred dose of Harley. A standout in the ensemble who doesn't completely overshadow the other characters. Overall, all the characters are great, or at the very least entertaining. Gunn even goes out of his way to add a bit more depth to a character like Rick Flag, who was such a bore the first go around. He never even brings up Enchantress despite her being the main focus of his character. Really the only connection to the original film is the fact Flag, Harley, and Boomerang know each other. They do remove 2 of them from the board, but I don't really mind. I found Boomerang annoying, and Flag, while more likable this time, is not a huge loss for me. The core main cast has amazing chemistry, especially between Bloodsport and Ratcatcher, whose friendship is kind of the emotional core of the whole movie. I'm keeping my analysis short for this one because I just think it's a good movie, and nothing behind the scenes really went wrong. My only nitpicky complaint would be the title. Can we just start using fun subtitles instead, just adding the, or even worse, using the same title again for a non-remake or reboot? This film does end up having a really important role in the history of the franchise, but I will save that for later. The Suicide Squad cost $185 million and earned $169 million at the box office. Again, while the movie did not make money, it was clear the studio loved working with Gunn, as they immediately had him develop the first and only TV show for the DCEU, which ended up being a spin-off of the Suicide Squad for the character of... the Invisible Bone. Again, I don't have much to say about Peacemaker. It is a good show, and I already have enough video files on my editing hard drive, so adding an 8-episode TV show to that bulk when what I mostly have to say is it's good is not in my interest. If you liked the Suicide Squad, you will like this, even managing to make you become fond of an antagonistic character from the movie. While downscaled to a TV budget, the idea of Outcast creating a found family and a slick action story is still very much this show. If I have to criticize it at all, they do kind of contradict some stuff initially established about Peacemaker. Like, one of his first big humanizing moments comes when he can't shoot a family with children, even though he knows they are controlled by alien parasites, and he claimed he would do this in the movie.
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
I know he could have just been showing face and lying, but it again feels like a writing shortcut to make a character more likable. Again, there are plenty of moments that fall flat, but there's always something else to make up for it. I can forgive a lot about this show because this opening sequence is easily top 5 of the century. Never skipped it, no matter how much HBO Max insisted I did. Nothing that we know of went wrong with the show, clearly due to Gunn's expertise at running a production, probably the reason why this TV show was produced so quickly, coming out 5 months after the Suicide Squad released. The only interesting tidbit is that they recast Vigilante after a few episodes were shot, but the integration of the new actor is so flawless, it is not noticeable at all. One other thing of note is the season finale, where the Justice League makes a cameo with Batman being missing and only Aquaman and Flash actually showing their faces and saying lines. It is a stark reminder at how poorly they handled their top shelf characters, as most of these people are so in and out of returning. DC films were so chaotic, they couldn't even rely on Justice League anymore. I think WB wanted to find a new centerpiece for this universe, as the current leads were kind of unreliable. They needed a star to become the new face, an Iron Man to redirect the universe towards more hopeful horizons. And they really thought they did. This is where everything changes. So this is a film that had been quietly forming in the background even before the DCEU even officially started existing. Development of a Shazam movie dates all the way back to the early 2000s. During all this time, it was just assumed the villain of any made Shazam movie would be Black Adam, as they were arch enemies in the comics. At the time, New Line Cinema, a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, was trying to get a Shazam movie together and had their eye on a certain rising star, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. They wanted him so badly, they gave him the open invitation of picking what role he wanted between Shazam or Black Adam. He did not make a decision until September of 2014, when he finally settled on Black Adam. So Johnson's star really started rising and fast, especially in the mid-2000s, where concerns started growing if it was a smart move to relegate such a huge star to a supporting antagonist role. It was decided in early 2017 that Shazam would continue development without Black Adam as the villain, instead getting his own solo film as an anti-hero. So while their intent was just to make another comic book film with a huge star, Johnson had other plans. You see, Dwayne Johnson at his peak became one of the highest grossing movie stars of the modern era, so let's say he had grown to develop an ego. Due to this ego, he became very involved in the development and production of all of his star vehicles, including Black Adam, to make sure they bolstered his persona. It started to seem like Johnson was constructing Black Adam not to be an addition to the DCEU, but something to restructure it entirely. Johnson would constantly talk up how powerful Adam would be and repeated the same phrase to the point it was memed.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change. The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change. The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change. The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Now, at first, you're just like, oh, Johnson is in a superhero movie, so he's trying to hype it up, but then we got more info. The main thing that really opened the possibility of this being a new direction is they started casting a Justice Society team. The Justice Society in the comics is essentially a proto-Justice League that was created in the 1940s featuring DC's first wave of heroes. This was a weird choice because previous films of this universe, especially Justice League, established there are no big heroes, which is why they team up. So going into Black Adam, I was most curious about how this team would be incorporated into this universe, as to not butt heads with what came before. On a larger scale, Black Adam ended up becoming a huge priority to the ever-changing Warner Brothers. So obviously things like the pandemic really hit studios hard, with the production and distributing completely on hold. People were being drained of money and trying to figure out any way to soften this industry blow. Hamada turned to streaming and started pushing for exclusive DC projects for HBO Max, including Wonder Twins, Blue Beetle, we'll get there, and Batgirl. AT&T, the parent company of Warner Media, signed a deal with Discovery, where Discovery acquired Warner Media and both would fuse together into a new company, Warner Bros. Discovery. Executive and former Discovery CEO David Zaslav became the CEO of this new company in April 2022 and immediately started to try to cut down costs. One of the biggest plugs he pulled was on the multiple Arrowverse CW shows, another growing shared DC universe on TV that had its own passionate fan base. The other front Zaslav attacked was the studio's ventures into streaming, as he felt they did not actually show profitable value. You can spend $100 million to make a streaming movie, but you cannot really prove its existence bumped up subscriber numbers to justify that cost. So Zaslav started to chop down on streaming projects, canceling Wonder Twins, and infamously canceled the release of an already filmed Batgirl movie. Batgirl had been a movie quietly being developed in the background, being filmed from late 2021 and wrapping right before the acquisition became final. The film costed about $90 million, and Zaslav saw no theatrical potential in it, so he decided to have the studio use it as a tax write-off in August of 2022. While the film had not been made available, there were screenings for the cast and crew to at least see their work before it was essentially buried. Now, this is bad, as it is another example of how this art form is controlled by business instead of integrity. We have gotten glimpses of Batgirl over the years, but I think this cancellation sent out a weird message. Zaslav declared Batgirl not worthy of throwing more money at to put it in theaters, which indirectly sends the message that every DC movie after this is better than it. So for anyone who hates any of these movies in this final stretch, they could not imagine Batgirl being any worse. I have one, but that's for later. Zaslav had also decided to reduce marketing budget, so Warner Brothers altered the rest of its release schedule to only 2 movies for the rest of the year. One was their hopeful awards player, Don't Worry Darling, which it wasn't.
You know, my favorite thing about the movie is like it feels like a movie. It feels like a real, like, you know, go to the theater film movie.
The other, of course, was their blockbuster play, Black Adam. Now, after all this, is Black Adam not only the savior of the DCEU, but for Warner Brothers itself? No, not at all. To be clear, I don't hate Black Adam for many of the same reasons I don't hate the theatrical cut of Justice League. Black Adam is focused on being an action movie for better and for worse. From a directorial perspective, Black Adam is actually a really well-made action movie. Due to the variety of powers the characters have, very rarely is a fight as simple as a punching contest. The director, Jaume Collet-Serra, clearly put a lot of effort to make sure the camera work was never stiff. Where Black Adam really goes wrong is in how it chooses to tell its story, which is bad. The central idea of the whole film is questioning if Black Adam is a good guy or a bad guy. He was essentially Shazam thousands of years ago, where he used his power to kill a dictator of the fictional city Kahndaq before disappearing. Turns out Black Adam was just magically imprisoned before being released by an archaeologist. Despite being hailed in legends as an altruistic savior, he is actually very violent and doesn't really do anything that heroic. In a big plot twist exposition dump, Adam reveals he is not the savior of legend, but his father, who in an opening flashback would tell his son not to fight back out of survival. His son, the actual champion, deemed worthy of power, transferred his abilities to his father to save his life, only to be killed himself. Now, this movie presents this revelation as huge, as Adam has been dodgy about his backstory and acting evasive. However, this whole twist doesn't hold due to a few reasons. That flashback in the beginning clearly shows Dwayne Johnson's head on a skinny body playing the father, even though they shoot it from angles to purposely hide his identity. Well, maybe he looks like his dad when he Shazams. Okay, fair. But what really makes this twist not work is the goddamn trailer where he explicitly reveals he is the dad.
My son sacrificed his life to save me.
Maybe cutting funds back on marketing was a bad idea, Zaslav. Even without the trailer spoiler, the film's whole gotcha moment falls very flat. The film attempts to deal with themes like colonialism, but does it in the broadest way while also undermining other characters. Black Adam's arc is to embrace his role as the protector of Kahndaq, but doesn't really seem to care about its people. He only really comes to this conclusion because his son wanted them to be free. He turns himself in because he accidentally hurts his surrogate son, but like 10 minutes later breaks out to try and save him again. He never witnesses any of the normal citizens suffering. His only interaction with citizens are the archaeologist who freed him, her comic relief brother, and her son who serves as his surrogate son. The son character actually cares about the state of his people, but unfortunately is a very standard character. At the end, he gives a rousing speech to the people to fight back, not against their oppressors, Intergang, but a newly risen demon army. This speech is almost laughable in how uninspiring it is, yet the film insists that it is words of revolution. On the other side, we have our new crop of heroes like the Justice Society, who are framed as oppressors as they work for an outside government agency tasked with detaining the guy who has only killed criminal occupiers of his homeland. Otherwise, how are the Justice Society incorporated into this universe? Well, they are just kind of shoved in. In the movie, the Justice Society is portrayed to be working with Amanda Waller while also being a decade-spanning group with a wide network of heroes. So where were they during Steppenwolf, or Zod, or Enchantress? We get barely any concrete info on this group, despite them almost being one of the main antagonistic forces before they team up. Despite their framing, the Justice Society isn't bad. I think the film would be less watchable if they were removed. They help add some more character dynamics while also making the world feel bigger. I think at its core, this is the purpose of their inclusion. Like, DC was so deeply unsure if the majority of their Justice League cast would ever return, so why not just create a new superhero team to fill the void? It seems Black Adam was almost meant to be a soft reboot of this universe, with the new focus being on these characters and slowly incorporate the previous successful heroes into this new hierarchy of power. This theory is backed by the next film having a post-credit scene where characters from Peacemaker offer Shazam a spot in the Justice Society. So it was easy to look past the main players and just move on. It seemed like that was going to be the case, but even Johnson ends up undercutting that idea. During promotion, Johnson would always talk up about how Black Adam could totally beat Superman in a fight. Fans thought Cavill would make an appearance at San Diego Comic-Con in 2022 to announce his return to the franchise. At their panel, Johnson made a vague comment about how a fight between Adam and Superman would go down, saying it depends on who is playing him. Some fans playfully booed and jeered, but it never actually seemed aggressive in any way.
I guess it probably all depends on who's playing Superman. I will just say that.
Johnson was so struck by this moment, however, that he went right to Walter Hamada the next day and asked him to get Cavill to film a post-credit cameo. Hamada refused, as he had been pushing forward a new Superman movie with a black lead. I never brought this up because this project is kind of the ones that were mentioned in passing, but never really picked up any momentum. It was unclear if this would have been DCEU because there are black characters in the comics who have taken up the mantle of Superman, but we never got any details if adapting one of them was the plan. So Johnson, mommying and daddying at a studio level, went to the current CEOs of Warner Brothers and asked for their permission, which they agreed. So Cavill has a cameo at the end, teasing how he and Adam will butt heads. This creates an odd situation where he was sent by Waller, but why she didn't send him earlier is never explained. Also, the movie ends with the Justice Society leaving Adam as they declare him not a threat. Plus, the only interaction Waller has had with any JL members up to this point was Bruce, which was very antagonistic in nature. So why is Superman there? He is there because it didn't matter how to Johnson, because he just wanted him there to please the fans in hopes that it would make the film a surefire hit. Cavill even posted to social media after opening weekend to declare he was back as Superman, and it was revealed a Man of Steel sequel was back in development. If you haven't picked up on it by now, this movie was nowhere close to a hit. The movie was not liked by critics and underperformed at the box office. The whole global pandemic affecting numbers thing is mostly out the window, with its only lasting effect being that audiences were pickier about what they chose to go to the theater for. Black Adam's budget has a few different reported numbers, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt by using its lowest reported number. With Black Adam's projected budget being $190 million, only grossing $393 million, clearly losing a lot of money. This was a flaw of timing, as selling a whole movie on Johnson wasn't such a surefire thing anymore. It was becoming clear Johnson was lacking range as an actor, and people were kind of sick of him doing the same thing. This movie honestly kind of changed the path of Johnson's career, as he went back to places he would be welcomed back with open arms, like wrestling, a Moana sequel, and a live-action remake coming up. He also seems to be venturing out and working with some more auteur directors who may actually challenge him to give a good performance. Black Adam was pushed as something to help change the DCEU. But instead it ended up being the beginning of its death rattle. Walter Hamada, upset about Batgirl and being overstepped about the whole Superman situation, stepped down as the head of DC Films 2 days before the release of Black Adam. Johnson had attempted to pitch Zaslav his plans for the DCEU, but Zaslav really had no interest. Zaslav knew DC could potentially become a huge moneymaker for the studio, but DC Films needed a fresh start to leave behind the troubled last decade. He knew if that they were going to start again, they needed someone with vision to help build things from scratch. 4 days after the release of Black Adam, it was announced producer Peter Safran and James Gunn would co-lead the newly named DC Studios to oversee new projects for what they were simply calling the DCU. Safran would mostly focus on the business side of things, while James focused on the creative. James Gunn seemed to make the most sense, because if he was able to make Polka Dot Man an interesting character, imagine what he could do with the A-listers. Rumors began to run rampant as what this meant for the DCEU. Are any of the DCEU actors coming back? Was anything before going to be canon? What would this new focus be? Some things were reported, such as paused development on Wonder Woman and a Man of Steel sequel, with Cavill even confirming he would not be playing the character anymore. They did manage to confirm Viola Davis and John Cena would continue into the DCU, with the upcoming Peacemaker Season 2 taking place in it. In January of 2023, DC released a video of Gunn breaking down what they were calling Chapter 1 of the DCU, where he confirmed just a few of the projects in the works. There was a lot of variety with some neat ideas that got people excited. There was just kind of one little thing. There were still 4 DCEU movies in the bank waiting to be released. The same video does feature Gunn talking about each of these movies briefly. However, his words are kind of vague in terms of canon. Like, he is still encouraging people to see them, but at the same time saying like the new Superman movie I am writing will be the real start of his plans. These 4 movies exist together as the final obstacles for DC Studios, as they were not considered for tax write-offs and needed theatrical releases. DC Studios were playing very coy if these movies actually mattered, but they still wanted you to buy a ticket. These movies were reshuffled numerous times, with some originally being planned to come out before another, but once you see the final order, you can really tell they just stopped caring. Like, if I was in charge, I would maybe put at least one movie between Black Adam and the guy he is closely associated with, but hey, that's just me. So Fury of the Gods pretty much went straight into development after the first film's opening weekend. David F. Sandberg returned to direct, and most of the cast returned as well. Now, there is not a ton of information on what was going on behind the scenes, but Shazam 2 seems to suffer from an imbalance. The film wanted to expand as a sequel, but kind of loses focus on its core. I talked a lot about the first film working so well because it managed to focus in on the idea of a young boy learning about what a family really is. Shazam 2 also wants to expand on the concept of family, but also wants to add more mythology, but never manages to find the right balance between the two. The film clearly establishes 2 problems Billy is having right off the bat. One is that Billy, after empowering the rest of his siblings, is trying to find unity as all of them have different interests and want to do things alone. This eventually ties into Billy's fear that he will be kicked out by his foster parents when he turns 18 in a few months. This is lightly expressed when Billy refuses to call his guardian mom. Now, you expect all of this to be developed, but it isn't. Billy doesn't call her mom once, then it isn't addressed till the climax where he does. One of the weirdest aspects of this movie is the lack of Billy. I don't have the exact numbers, but the screen time between Billy and Shazam felt a bit more balanced in the first one, while this one tips very much in favor of Shazam. Again, we have no proof, but I would not be surprised if Levi requested more screen time so he could do his shtick. And his shtick in this just doesn't feel justified anymore. In the first film, Shazam was kinda cocky and of course was freaked out about his powers. Levi's exaggerated way of performing fit the first film well for those kind of behaviors. In Fury of the Gods, it feels wrong. When Billy does appear, he just seems like a calm kid who is a little moody but seems to be mostly comfortable with this new role as a few years have passed since we last saw him. When he is Shazam, he is played up like a complete doofus. Now this usually would bother me more, but Shazam Fury of the Gods nails one really important aspect for me, which is consistency. Despite my prior criticisms, I don't really hate Shazam 2. I don't think it is as good as the first one, but it manages to not fall completely flat for me as it hyper-focuses on its comedic aspects. I am not claiming this movie's always funny and every gag is great, but it just still has that playful tone the first one possessed. The film rarely asks you to take it that seriously, and instead just tries to be fun when it can. There's even a fair amount of creativity present. One of my favorite aspects is how the villains use the original Shazam staff to depower the family, bringing back some of that fun body-swapping energy from the first one. Speaking of the villains, this sequel decided to completely not follow up on the original setup. The post-credit scene of Shazam 1 sets up a character called Mr. Mind, one of Shazam's few devoted villains. Apparently in early drafts, he was meant to play a role, but they couldn't fit him in, so you reduced him to another post-credit scene that borders on parodies of modern post-credit scenes.
Tell me everything.
Just one more thing I need to do.
Oh, god damn it!
I didn't mind the actual villains, the Daughters of Atlas, as they had a neat infighting dynamic and were all played by talented actors. I understand why people don't like this one, but I just can't bring myself to really dislike it. I think if you liked Shazam 1 and want more Shazam, this mostly scratches that itch. Also, Wonder Woman shows up in it in a forced Deus Ex Machina cameo scored by her shitty theme song. Response was very mixed, but what is really important to note is the box office. Shazam Fury of the Gods cost about $125 million and only managed to gross $134 million, making it the lowest grossing DCEU movie up to this point. By this point in time, so-called superhero fatigue has started to set in. Even their much more popular competitor Marvel was starting to have underperformers this same year. What didn't help was the announcement of the imminent new universe. They tried to play innocent, like, you know, Zachary Levi could come back as Shazam in the DCU, but then pretty quickly after this movie came out, they went, yeah, no, he's never coming back. This is the last time Shazam appears in the DCEU. Once this was confirmed, it really made people realize these next few movies really just didn't matter. The only people who would want to see these are DC fans who just want to hold this universe's hand before it's pulled off life support. The next movie did have some sort of extra appeal, however, as Gunn implied in his announcement video that it would reset continuity. So does this next film have any importance to the DCU? I could have believed it, if not for that the events that led up to the production of this film weren't such a huge fucking mess. Okay, here we go. I hate this movie. This is the only DCEU movie I despise. Like, I don't like the Snyder stuff, but from a certain angle, I get it. The first Suicide Squad at least has Leto's Joker, so I can laugh at it. I can't find a single thing to like in Flash. The main thing that really shot this film in the foot was the insistence from higher ups that the film had to adapt the comic book Flashpoint. Flashpoint is an event series where Flash messes with the past, leaving him stranded in a twisted version of the present. Eventually, he undoes these changes, but still ends up rebooting the entire comic universe, which became the New 52 Initiative. When Snyder was in charge, adapting Flashpoint was the plan so they could restart the DCEU, as Justice League 3 would have concluded Snyder's saga, but leave a universe no one wanted to continue. There was a large amount of creative turnover for this project. Some people came in wanting to make just a simple Flash movie, but were booted out because making a Flashpoint adaptation was the priority. They wanted to wipe the slate clean of the mess they had made, which was appealing to Geoff Johns, who, let me check my notes here, wrote the comic book Flashpoint. Even when Hamada took over, they still wanted this movie to be Flashpoint. Despite the script still being written, DC Films managed to lock down a director with Andy Muschietti, fresh off his hit It duology. Hamada did have one idea for this soft reboot that they actually managed to put together. He wanted Michael Keaton back as Batman. Having loved the 1989 movie, Hamada's new plan was not only to have Keaton in Flash, but be the main continuity DCEU Batman going forward, even having Keaton be Batman in the cancelled Batgirl movie. So there were a lot of things pinned to this movie that by the time it came out, it didn't really matter anymore. They filmed from April to October of 2021. Things were finally coming together until Ezra Miller went on a bender. So back in 2020, Miller was recorded in a bar where they seemingly choked a woman, then threw her to the ground. So Warner Brothers overlooked this, but then a few months after filming, Miller was kind of terrorizing the people of Hawaii. They were arrested multiple times for various incidents where they would threaten and assault people. Now, this is already bad, but then over the course of 2022, more and more reports started coming out about their behavior, from burglary to grooming underage children. There is so much, it is hard to keep track of. All of this obviously had people calling for Ezra to be dropped from the film, which Warner Brothers just couldn't do. It's a hard pill to swallow, but when you actually have seen the movie, you understand why. Ezra Miller is not good in this movie, but they are in every single scene and play multiple characters. They would need to actually refilm the entire movie, which already had a huge budget due to the extensive visual effects work. So instead, they just had Keaton and Sasha Calle, who was playing Supergirl, do all the press for the movie, and even altered promotional material to de-emphasize Miller in, the Flash movie. I want to be clear, while I don't condone Ezra's behavior, it doesn't really affect my opinion of their performance or the movie. Bad people are capable of giving great performances, and I can for the most part separate art from the artist. So with that, I can now say the main reason I hate this movie is because Ezra Miller is fucking terrible in it. I don't think Ezra should have been recasted for this, because they shouldn't have been casted in the first place. I already complained about how annoying Ezra was in their previous appearances, so having a whole movie with them was already a tough hill to climb. But worse, there are two of them. Through time travel shenanigans, Barry is stuck in 2013 with an alternate version of himself who grew up with parents. This second Barry is one of the most annoying, despicable characters I have had to endure in years. All of Ezra's worst impulses as an actor are dialed up to 11 when they play Barry 2. Worse is that the plot of the movie has it so they have Flash powers for most of it. So if you came to see Flash because you wanted to see Flash do Flash stuff, you have to watch this annoying character learn how to do everything while mugging at the camera. The dynamic between these two Barrys gets so stale so quickly, and it is the majority of the movie. I'm so annoyed you have powers and I don't. Duh, I'm a goofy idiot. What adds another layer to this is that the movie just isn't funny. It does not know how to properly balance its comedy, which it is clearly putting a lot of emphasis on. The comedy is so pandering and not well thought out that it just ends up undercutting big moments. The most egregious is during the first fight scene we get with Batman. It might have been cool to see this Batman do more modern action, but the film insists on cutting back to the Barrys because Barry 1 is CGI puking because Barry 2 ran with him too fast. What could have been a really cool scene is completely ruined by thinking watching a guy puke for a minute is so goddamn funny. Ezra's dramatic acting is also terrible when the film calls for it. They try to force in some emotional scenes, but you don't believe either of them for a second. So Ezra sucks, but are there any other characters that save the movie? No, not at all. Almost every single supporting character is either sleepwalking or just radiates an energy of, I don't want to be here. The general Flash supporting cast are barely in the film, with Kiersey Clemons showing up as Iris briefly at the beginning, then briefly at the end. Barry's two co-workers get some scenes in the new reality, but they are just annoying. Supergirl is just kind of there, and her motivations don't make any sense. First, she hates humans because they imprisoned her, then quickly changes her mind because Barry was nice to her. Early on, there are Batman and Wonder Woman cameos where they're just not trying. Wonder Woman is accompanied by her shitty music. Again. Affleck gets a bit more with what was intended as his final scene where he tells Barry not to mess with time, but Barry's an idiot and does it anyway. Now, what about Michael Keaton? He is sadly very boring in this film. While it is kind of interesting to see Keaton's Batman in more modern action sequences, his presence lacks any impact. Hamada wanted to bring him back, but none of the creatives involved could come up with a good reason to have him here. Instead, he is just a wise old superhero who spouts old quotes even when it doesn't make any sense. If this is the energy he was going to bring to the DCEU, I'm kind of glad it got cut short. The film doesn't even have a true antagonist. It kind of seems like it's going to be Zod, as the world has no Superman to fight against him, but it doesn't matter. Then we have an evil Flash who turns out to be Barry 2 growing older and corrupt. Now to get into a very complicated topic, which is this film's take on time travel. I could get into all the major inconsistencies this film has about its rules and how they constantly break them, like how sometimes Barry will replace his past self while other times he pops out directly in front of an older version. I want to focus on how time travel is used more to be lazy with its storytelling and undercut its own themes. So the movie adapts the basic premise of Flashpoint, which is Barry goes back in time to stop his mom from being murdered. Usually Barry will go to his house to literally stop the guy who murders his mom. But in this movie, her living or dying is completely dependent on a can of tomatoes she forgot to grab earlier. She forgets to buy them and asks his dad to go back and get it, so this murderer is like, no man home, time to do some killing. So Barry puts the can in her cart and tries to return to the present, only to be knocked into 2013 by a dark flash for some reason. The Dark Flash later claims it is because they wanted to drain them of their energy, but they literally disappear for most of the middle and make no attempt to confront Barry until the very end, so whatever. In this alternate 2013, superheroes do not exist, except Batman, who explains that Barry's time travel also caused different universes to fuse and... you know what, none of this shit matters. This isn't just me saying this, because the movie itself comes to the same conclusion, even blatantly stating the lesson Barry needs to learn early on.
But every problem has a solution. Sometimes you just have to let it go.
So the big final climax of this movie is the heroes fighting Zod in a big empty desert, as Supergirl has the birthing matrix instead of Clark, the first time it has been brought up in 10 years. Now, even if you are someone who is enjoying this movie and were on the edge of your seat, this climax is disappointing. We get all this action and things blowing up when eventually Batman and Supergirl die. The Barrys time travel to try to prevent this, and they just die again, then they keep doing it, but they just keep dying. Barry too literally becomes Dark Flash because he can't let go and accept certain things cannot be changed. Barry 1 eventually gives up and realizes the only way to prevent all this chaos is to take the tomato can out of his mom's cart, thus reverting the timeline. Now this is a bunch of horse shit. Barry's goal flip-flops throughout the entire movie as the rules of time travel constantly change because of the shitty script. The way all this works completely shifts depending on what the script needs the stakes to be. Whenever we need this world to be Barry's new past, it is, but if they need it to be a completely alternate world, it is. The script is just such a mess that it is hard to believe that anyone could have constructed this series of events on purpose. Barry goes from wanting to save his mom to making sure his younger self gets powers to losing his powers, to wanting to stop Zod, to getting his powers back, to just giving up. All Barry wants is to return to a present where his mom is alive, but is constantly getting sidetracked by random bullshit that the ending completely undoes anyway. In Flashpoint, Barry does return to the present and already doesn't have powers and no memory of how it happened. He experiences how awful the world has become before trying to get his powers back to fight who he thinks caused this, before finding out he did it himself. And he didn't cause this with a tomato can, but by actually stopping her murderer. Flashpoint is nowhere near a perfect story, but its pacing makes sense. This film feels so restrained by the fact that it tries to adapt key moments from it, but also wants Keaton's Batman and a second Barry while needing it all to fit in the framework of this cinematic universe. We spend hours watching these events unfold before he just goes, I guess the whole saving my mom thing isn't worth the effort. The worst choice a time travel story can make is the protagonist undoing everything we just spent time watching. It's a little more acceptable if maybe they learned a lesson and grew from their adventure, but the movie makes it clear that Barry didn't really learn anything. We get this long sequence to show off Ezra's supposed acting skills, where they put the can back needing to accept the present as it is, but at the last moment, proving they have learned nothing about messing with the timeline, instead move the tomato cans in the store so his dad can be seen by a camera, thus clearing his name over his wife's murder. That whole shitty scene now means absolutely nothing, because Barry didn't learn anything. You are still altering the timeline, which the events of this movie told you was not a good idea. This leads to the actual ending where Barry meets Bruce, who is now George Clooney. Then a CGI tooth falls out of their mouth because that is so funny, and the movie ends. George Clooney being here was a very late addition pushed by Gunn and Safran. They meant it to be a funny little gag, but people were so hung up on the idea that this movie would set up the DCEU, some thought this meant Clooney would be the new Batman in Gunn's universe. Originally, the scene was supposed to be Keaton making him the new DCEU Batman, and Supergirl was even included, making it so all the time we spent with them kinda meant something. Gal Gadot was also meant to show up to establish she was still here, and she is still getting a sequel. Then when The Rock got Cavill back, they altered the scene to also include Superman. Gunn and Safran, knowing this would confuse audiences, as this status quo would never be followed up on, threw it all out for a George Clooney cameo. So this movie now counts as the final appearances of Wonder Woman and Batman in the DCEU. Retroactively, Superman's cameo in Black Adam is now the final appearance of Cavill. The post-credits scene, however, includes Jason Momoa to assure people it will be the same Aquaman, so please go see his sequel, folks. Speaking of cameos, this movie wanted to explore the multiverse, and it really only does that with Batman, kind of. He explains he is from a different universe, essentially, that is intersecting with this new timeline. The only other time they dabble into the multiverse is this short sequence where Barry witnesses various universes collapsing while time traveling. They very shittily use this as a cheap excuse to use deepfakes to bring back multiple dead actors from previous DC shows and movies. One of the worlds is a reference only true DC fanboys would understand, as we get a de-aged Nick Cage as Superman. You have to be so deep in the DC pocket to get why they did this, which most people aren't, so this part is nothing short of confusing. Back to the deepfakes, while there is a ton of ethical problems with resurrecting dead actors for nostalgia bait, let's focus on just how it looks like shit. Christopher Reeve looks like a goddamn screensaver. They also felt it was appropriate to include George Reeves, who drank himself to death due to lack of work from being typecasted as Superman. This quality is just unacceptable. Again, I don't love dunking on visual effects, but this movie looks like dog shit because of them, because it makes up 85% of the movie. It is clear that this production relied so heavily on VFX shots in almost every scene that it would probably take years to make them even look passable. The actual quality makes things I know are practical look like shitty CGI, like Flash's suit, which looks terrible. When it is definitely CGI, Ezra Miller's head looks like it is floating in empty space. That is really what this movie is. Empty space. I despise every aspect of this movie and wish it would erase itself from the timeline. Gunn claiming it was a reset just isn't true. This film did not create the DCU. It was something meant to help clean up this franchise, but instead it got thrown away like the trash it is. Flash cost upwards of $220 million due to the extensive visual effects and only managed to gross $271 million. I imagine it only crossed the $200 million mark due to Keaton's presence and the fanboys who thought it would lead into the DCU. So for me, this is easily the series' low point. But does it get any better? Well, just kidding, Blue Beetle fucking slaps. So Blue Beetle has kind of a unique origin when it comes to its development. As mentioned earlier, the film was originally supposed to be an HBO Max exclusive, but seeing the progress made by the creative team, WB decided to increase its budget for a full theatrical release. What made this project even more curious was Gunn and Safran talking about it the most positively of the 2023 releases. While still being vague, they made it clear that the film can easily fit into the DCU, as it doesn't really contradict any of their plans. Blue Beetle is a pretty standalone movie, which is one of its strengths. The film knows where to place its focus and tells a fully complete central narrative that ends on a satisfying conclusion. There are some things that are underdeveloped, especially when it comes to the Scarab and its origins, but that is mostly throwaway lines for sequel setup. In my opinion, Blue Beetle's greatest strength is that it just gets it. That being the general appeal of a superhero narrative. The basic story of an average person gaining great power and learning to use it for good. Shazam was the last DCEU movie to really come close to that feeling. I would have liked Shazam as a kid, but I would have been obsessed with Blue Beetle. The film does an amazing job showing off his power set while also establishing the limitations that just screams creativity, making the action scenes all fun to watch. Also, the score did not need to go as hard as it does. Blue Beetle greatly reminds me of the first Spider-Man movie, with its mixing of genre conventions and its general playful vibe, but still managing to capture the tone of a comic book. The first time Jaime suits up reminded me of the playful horror of Sam Raimi. The transformation is surprisingly visceral and a little horrifying. Shout out to the sound design team, who gave Jaime this terrifying digitized scream. At the end of this sequence gives us hands down the coolest costume reveal shot in the DCEU, and it deserves it, because this is the best costume this series has produced. While being mostly ripped straight out of the comics, the actual textures and movements are perfect, especially as we have now seen how it can look so wrong in the past. Overall, the effects of the film are usually pretty great, with a blend of CGI and practical techniques. The movie's other greatest strength is its portrayal of community. Jaime's family dynamic is entertaining, and you grow to really like them, which is important as they are the key to the emotional core of the film. I can't really say any other DCEU movie makes me as emotional as this film. Like, I cared more about the fate of Jaime's dad than I did fucking Superman. A little thing I want to praise is this being the most recent superhero movie to consistently explore the morality of murder. Movies like Shang-Chi and Wonder Woman have scenes where the hero tries to kill their villain and they go like, no, murder's badong, as if killing would make their souls impure. However, they unquestionably murder random cronies during multiple action scenes, only deciding to not kill certain people they have empathy for. You can say character development, but the movie frames it as if these lives don't matter, but this one does. Jaime does not kill anyone, including random henchmen. Any murders done by the good guys are exclusive to his family. At the end, when he almost goes through with it, it actually holds emotional weight compared to all the other examples, because this would be the first life he would take. Jaime has a moment of weakness, but through his journey learns why the alien scarab chose him in the first place. Even the scarab has minor character development as it also comes to understand this is not who he is. The team also made the choice to set the film in the fictional city of Palmyra City, to give it its own unique environment. You learn a lot about these characters who live in the Keys, staring directly across the water at high towers with bright signs. Now, despite all my praise, Blue Beetle is not perfect. Some of the humor really isn't my style, and there is a fair amount of stiff acting, especially from Susan Sarandon. She doesn't make the best villain, and seems like she doesn't really want to be doing this. Her muscle and actual physical threat, Carapax, is a little better. He actually has a compelling backstory, and I really like how his power suit starts as a prototype before being enhanced for the final battle. Despite these problems, the most endearing thing about Blue Beetle is you can just feel everyone behind it cared, and it wears its heart on its sleeve, making it the most genuinely sincere film in the franchise. While I think The Suicide Squad is the best DCEU film from its construction, Blue Beetle may actually be my favorite due to the overall feeling. I saw this film twice in theaters, and every time the people I left with were completely satisfied. Now, despite all my praise, this film did terribly. The film got a mostly positive response, with at worst its critics finding it average. Budget-wise, Blue Beetle cost at most $125 million and only grossed $130 million, making it the lowest grossing DCEU movie ever. There are some outside contributing factors to this, as during its release and the months leading up to it, the SAG-AFTRA strikes were happening, barring the whole cast from doing any promotion. These probably lowered the marketing budget, but the film was still not a success. Despite this, however, Gunn's comments about Blue Beetle being in the DCU may still hold up. One of the projects that have been in development is an animated series that continued the narrative of the movie, which I think would be perfect. If you take any recommendations from these videos, please watch Blue Beetle. I think it's neat. Alright, let's wrap this shit up. I realized after writing part 2 that this whole video really is just an Aquaman sandwich, with the first starting it and the second one ending it all. So Aquaman ended up being the highest grossing DC movie of all time, so development of a sequel began almost immediately. With its huge success, it is clear Aquaman 2 was suffering a bit from too many cooks in the kitchen. On top of the various producers who were keyed in on how successful Aquaman could be, we had most of the original creative team, including James Wan, return. Wan made it very clear he was interested in expanding the world of the underwater kingdoms. Jason Momoa also had more input into the film, as he was an attributing factor to the first success. Momoa wanted the film to explore the effects of climate change on the ocean. Aquaman 2 was originally supposed to come out after The Flash, so it would also be the first film in their hypothetical soft reboot, even filming a scene with Michael Keaton. Flash got delayed, so they chose to refilm those scenes with Affleck to maintain canon. Aquaman 2 was eventually delayed again to come out after Flash. However, once DC Studios was formed, Gunn and Safran made them cut out the Batman scene altogether. It seems like when they first shot this movie, all these ideas were included, but when they saw it all put together, they knew they had to trim it down, requiring some reshoots to help condense things. On top of all of this, during the course of production, Amber Heard was going through a highly publicized court case against her ex-husband Johnny Depp, where media and internet commentators were chomping at the bit to knock her down. Some even wanted her recasted, but that ended up not happening. People like to claim her role was reduced due to this, but I don't think that holds much weight. Dolph Lundgren, who plays her father, says they both had a bigger storyline they shot before it was reduced in reshoots to make way for the aspects they wanted to focus on, which was always intended to not include Mara. Did all this reworking help the movie? Nope. All these different ideas are present for the most part in the final film, but it is not expanded upon in the ways they wanted. The biggest strength is Wan's main want of exploring other aspects of Atlantis. We get glimpses of more creatures and creative technologies. The highlight for me is when Black Manta takes control of this abandoned equipment of the Lost Kingdom, and it all looks really cool. The production design of these environments and machines are unique and top-notch. Some of Momoa's contributions is also mixed in with the technology, as the film points out that the machines expel high amounts of greenhouse gases. It is brought up as another reason Arthur needs to stop Manta, but it is just an incidental detail. Honestly, most of the environmental messaging in the movie are just a handful of passing mentions. Its inclusion here is just to make the star happy, as it factors so little into the overall story. At the end, he gives a speech about working with the UN to help heal the planet's environment. The real problem is that we have all these different aspects, but it is not the main focus of the movie. Wan decided the main anchor of the whole film would be an enemies to allies adventure with the previous villain Orm. This is not inherently a bad idea. However, we already did this. It is kind of annoying how much of this butting heads dynamic is just copy and pasted from the previous film, as the main focus of that was Mara and Arthur. It just feels so lazy and makes the movie extra boring, as you feel you are just going through the motions. They do absolutely nothing interesting with this, and it ends exactly how you expect it to end. Orm's arc is very standard, going from reluctant, untrustworthy ally to earning the respect of Atlantis' royal circle. Arthur's arc is much weaker, as he just learns to trust his instincts. Despite being the king of a whole nation for the past few years, Arthur does not seem to have matured in any way. Sure, he has a kid, but he still has his dumb, jockish personality. Like, they wanted Momoa to be fun, but you can do that without reducing his maturity as much as they did. This hyper-focus on the dynamic messes up the whole structure, with the term Lost Kingdom not being mentioned until right before the final act. The only diversion from goofy Arthur Orm adventures is Black Manta repeating the same scene over and over with one of his scientist henchmen. This is kind of the reason I think Amber Heard's role was always meant to be smaller, a controversial court case or not. The Arthur-Orm relationship was always meant to be the main focus, which leaves no room for more Mara scenes. This focus all around reduces the importance of prominent characters from the previous film. Willem Dafoe's Volko was completely absent, as he was killed off screen, with Nicole Kidman showing up in the beginning briefly, then never again until 30 minutes in during an action scene. Fun fact, the infamous Nicole Kidman AMC ad did not play before the last two movies I saw that featured her, first being this, and the second being Baby Girl. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is not the worst movie in the DCEU, but it is the most we don't give a shit anymore movie in the series. The fact this retroactively became the final film was not the intention, but ends up feeling like an afterthought. Can you imagine the shock of watching Man of Steel, then watching this? Maybe the final image of this universe being Orm enjoying a burger with a cockroach in it is weirdly fitting. No one in control of this series, and the audience watching, just really did not give a shit anymore. At some point in time, there was a version of Aquaman 2 that was fun, and expanded upon what made the first film work, but instead the sentiment for it became, just release it so we can move on. Aquaman 2 is made for $215 million and grossed $440 million, a huge drop from the first film. People knew what was coming, and most people who saw this were either audiences who loved the first film or wanted to see how this series ends. My screening felt more like a funeral than a fun blockbuster. Any hopes of a grand send-off were gone, with DC seemingly hoping you would forget most of these projects so they can move ahead. Hopefully I managed to post this before the release of James Gunn's Superman, labeled as the official start of the DCU. Creature Commandos has come out, but James Gunn did not put as much emphasis on it, as it was something he was developing before he became the head of DC Studios, that was retrofitted for the DCU. I thought it was good, but still felt it relied on too many of James Gunn's usual bag of tropes. It does make canon a bit clearer, as Gunn states if something from the DCEU is mentioned, it is canon. Things like Rick Flagg's death is permanent going into this new universe, as we immediately meet his mourning father. This character has been confirmed to make a physical appearance in Superman, played by the same voice actor Frank Grillo. Creature Commandos is almost a stealth sequel to the Suicide Squad. They also made it clear that they would just label things like the Batman as Elseworlds to establish what is part of the DCU. So if people could stop claiming Pattinson will be DCU Batman, that would be very appreciated. Superman is not only going to be a test for DC as a brand, but also a test of Gunn's range. Gunn has shown he can handle sincerity, but I'm curious to see if he can handle a superhero project where he can't have someone flipping the bird as a substitute for a joke. Gunn's main approach to development is that a good script will always take precedence over forced milestones. This is the reason that the announced DCEU Batman movie has no set release date, while the third DCEU film will officially be Clayface. They have even broke a casting barrier with Jason Momoa playing Lobo in Supergirl, a character he originally thought he was called into play before he found out it was Aquaman. They were stripping the DCEU clean and cherry-picking the stuff they liked, which right now is most obviously Gunn's work, and Blue Beetle seemingly. Warner Bros. Discovery has really made it clear how much is riding on Superman to be a success, because its potential failure will not only shut down the DCU, but may put the whole studio in jeopardy. Many Snyder fan communities are even rooting for the DCU's failure to validate their insistence on his film's quality and hoping it will make Warner Bros. Put Zack back in charge. While the focus is solely on the future, I don't want people to completely discard the DCEU. Yes, I and many others didn't love every entry, but some people loved these. With the slow death of cable and physical media as we normalize streaming, I worry about studios just erasing movies. Many have done it in the past, and hell, the DCEU did just that. Hundreds of thousands of people worked on these films, and I found something to appreciate in each of them, except one. The DCEU was a mess, but it exists, and it deserves to exist for the people that loved it, and for those that want to learn from its mistakes. I am excited for the DCU because one of the reasons I like comic book adaptations is to see how other artists interpret these characters. There will never be a definitive end to any kind of adaptation. This Superman movie could succeed or fail, but there will eventually be a whole new one in the future. I can say so far, based on promotional materials, it seems like it embraces the aspects I like about the character. Maybe I won't like it. Maybe it will be average. You can say that about literally any movie, but like Superman's iconic symbol, let's have some hope things will be better. Thanks for watching.